This is our first webinar of OER Colorado, introducing the platform and open educational resources to you. So we're excited to have you join today. My name is Joanna Skamitzi, and I'm a professional learning specialist with ISKME. So we invite you to share in the chat your name and your role in education. I'm actually also a K-12 biology teacher. I teach students who have severe and profound special needs who are in separate settings. And so North Carolina, where I live, has a virtual public school that supports them. But I'm here joining you today, not just as a teacher, but as someone to help introduce you to OER, Open Educational Resources. And ISKME partners with Colorado and many other states to support educators in finding, using, creating, and sharing OER. So a big theme today is going to be something that we're sharing and finding. So just invite you to kind of put on your hat and think about, what does sharing mean, right? What's something that someone has shared with you recently? Hopefully not like a virus or a cold or something like that. Hopefully someone has shared something nice with you. So we'll do that in the chat box as folks are getting started. And I'd like to ask Teresa and Mallory if they want to introduce themselves while folks are using the chat box.
Hi, good morning. Good. I'm just checking to make sure I had my mute off. Good morning. I'm Teresa Becker. I am a professional development coordinator with the OERColorado project. And so we welcome ISKME today to help everybody learn a little bit more about OER in Colorado. Thank you.
And hi, everyone. Good morning. I'm Mallory Clem. I'm with CDE, and I'm in the Schools of Choice unit in the Office of Online and Blended Learning. And our office has been tasked with just overseeing this part of the statute in Colorado Revised Statute and working closely with the CRBOCs and Teresa on the development and execution of this project. So thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Mallory. Thanks, Teresa. They are such wonderful partners. It's such a gift to get to work with them, and you all are in such good hands with them leading this work and sharing it and curating things for you all. So excited to have you all here. Please use the chat box as much as you would like to connect with each other. It's how we build community, but also for you to share your thoughts. One of my biggest things that I love to do is to see other people's thinking. So I really encourage you to make your thinking visible in the chat box if that speaks to you. Sometimes we have people who say the chat box goes too fast. I don't like it. It's also okay to keep the chat box closed if you would prefer. So both of those are ways for you to participate in today's webinar. So this is part of our welcome. A big part of open education is building community, making connections in ways that maybe you weren't really expecting, and continuing the community after each individual session. So we're excited to have this session series. Teresa and Mallory have come up with a really great design where we'll do 2 this spring and 2 this fall. So you'll have a week between now and our next session to bring some new people back with you or work on what you're experiencing and learning today. And then we'll reconvene back in the fall, and you might have done some other learning between now and then. Today's webinar's focus is really on what are OER and why are they important to Colorado? And then how do you find them and how do you use them? And we'll offer to you some next steps that you can take around engaging with OER and open education. So at the end of today, you should be able to identify the license of really any resource, because part of what we'll look at with licensing is it doesn't just apply to educational resources. There are some specific nuances to open educational resources. But when we look at Creative Commons licenses, which some of you might already have experience with, they really apply to any work that has been created, can be given a Creative Commons license. We'll look and talk and analyze the benefits of using OER. You'll probably have some concerns or questions that come up with that as well. And then we'll dig into the platform OERColorado and look at how the features of that platform will help you select and apply a license. And I'll be teasing or kind of doing that early sprinkle, right? Preview of how to remix a resource. So I'll show you how you can start to create OER on OERColorado. And then we'll make sure that you have some good ideas and best practices for searching, because we know that searching can sometimes be a frustrating experience if you feel like you put a lot of time into searching and you still can't find what you're really looking for. So, Teresa, do you want to speak a little bit about the why of OER?
I can do that. Thanks, Joanna. So with by setting up this the OER Colorado set of curriculum libraries in the state, Colorado joins more than 20 other states who are part of sort of an open education movement that got started in the mid 2000s with the Go Open network from the Federal Office of Instructional Technology, our education technology. And so we're really proud to introduce the new library to Coloradoans. I know that with with COVID, it was quite a bit of a challenge pivoting to online education so quickly. Many people struggled with finding resources. And so that was one of the initial impetuses for creating a repository of resources that teachers could use. But what has really stuck around, it's actually, many districts have virtual or blended learning schools that have stuck around post-COVID. And we've also seen that you can really use OER resources not just in online and blended environments, but they really can be accessible in a variety of different school settings, whether it be, having students use a virtual OER textbook on a Chromebooks, or even, locating supplemental resources. My son's teacher recently had them design their own musical instruments using a resource that she had found on OERColorado. And so there's a lot of different uses for this. Really, it just gives teachers the option to I know as a teacher, I was always searching for free resources, either for a homework assignment or something to supplement a lesson maybe that I had taught. And I didn't know that there was this whole movement that has a name for searching for free resources, which is Open Educational Resources and Open Education. And the benefit of this library and the benefit of this movement is that it takes sort of the hard work off of teachers by vetting these resources, the copyright on these resources ahead of time, making sure that they are available for educational use. And most of the resources in our repository in our library are from institutional providers. So we've got some really great collections from Colorado institutions. CU Boulder and CSU Pueblo are big providers and producers of quality educational resources. We have things from Library of Congress, well-known providers like Khan Academy, code.org. So it's a nice single location where teachers can search for things, hopefully find things. And then you're also welcome to create and share resources that you may have made that you find to be useful in your classroom. The last little plug I'll put in for why OER in Colorado is that open education also, one of its primary tenets is collaborative sharing of knowledge. And so the site is a great place for you to host your professional learning community as well. Whether that be in a group, we can support groups that are at the school site level or at the district level, or even communities of practice that take place perhaps across the state. And we'll take a little tour of that later on with Joanna. But OER in Colorado has a lot of benefits in terms of reducing costs and giving teachers more agency.
Thanks, Teresa. Mallory, anything you want to add?
Not anything besides just that what Teresa mentioned, that we have a lot of authors in the higher education space. And that's where you see kind of the PK 12 plus is our phrasing for the OERColorado site, where we definitely have looked beyond K-12, although that's the primary focus, into pre-K. And then, of course, Teresa's great collaboration with our higher ed institutes and CTE and concurrent enrollment. And then there is a separate space outside of our K-12 OERColorado, where the higher education, Colorado Department of Higher Ed, has a separate movement with OER in the higher ed space, in addition to what we're kind of doing in our K through 12 space. So just wanted to add that there is an additive space in higher ed when it comes to OER through CDHE. But otherwise, Teresa did a great job explaining its purpose and its benefit.
Absolutely.
One thing,
Go ahead, Teresa.
one thing more I might add quickly, because I do know that we have some librarians joining us today. And I want to point out that the OERColorado hosts two sites. One is a standalone microsite, and the other is a hub on the OER Commons library that ISKME hosts. And the hub is really open to the general public. So libraries can direct patrons there, and librarians are also welcome to access and use both of the library spaces.
Absolutely. Thanks, Teresa. You lined me right up for what I was going to talk about and add as well, especially for our librarians who are joining. And so OER Commons is what I sometimes call the mothership. And so this was the first place of a repository for open educational resources. We keep throwing OER around. We'll come back to that definition in just a second, of what exactly it is. And so OER Commons was the first place. It's a digital global library where anyone can create an account. OERColorado is specifically for Colorado PK-12 educators, and then some exceptions for other folks who might be given additional accounts. But anyone can look on OER Commons, and Teresa and the Colorado team do a really great job of helping look at what resources might we want to migrate on to this OERColorado, what we call microsite. One of the benefits of OER of Colorado having their own microsite is they are able to align things to their own resources. They're able to do the vetting and have some support and regulation over what resources show up on this platform and how they show up. And so if you are a curator by heart and you are finding things and you don't see them here, Teresa and Mallory are great. We're so excited to have you connect and be part of the team for how you might want to add OER and connect with them. ISKME also does a lot of work with the Digital Public Library of America, which is a great source of also OER. And resources that are licensed for educational use. And so the reason I bring this up is we're going to be doing a webinar where we look at this relationship between libraries and educational spaces, especially in that summer space, where a lot of students sometimes historically have that summer slide, and how our community libraries are a great way to kind of make sure families and communities know about the library programming to help support that. So we're actually working with DPLA to host a webinar that will look at, hey, how can librarians find and curate things on OERColorado that might support their summer programming, so that not only are they sharing and creating space on these platforms, but they're also creating a place where community members can come even over the summer. So, you think about like a third grader, well, they don't know who their teacher is going to be in the fall. Who can they turn to between June and September, right? And so one of the things we're excited is how to really help librarians, especially community librarians, find their space so that parents and families and community members can access those resources as well. So as we go through and we continue to thank Teresa and Mallory and all that the OER Colorado team are doing, please reach out with any questions, because one of the big pieces, as Teresa said, talks about this idea of reducing barriers, right? Open education, what we call OEP, open education practices, is this idea that, and this is why most people get into education, right? They want to increase access. They want to make sure that we're sharing knowledge and expertise and that everyone has access to resources, especially resources that can be customized for some of our students who might be kind of historically marginalized. So at ISKME, we do a lot of accessibility work. We've worked a lot with some members of the Colorado team around OER and accessibility, and really looking at, hey, because we can make changes to OER because they're openly licensed, how can we modify resources to make sure that someone using a screen reader can access them, or someone with low vision can access them, or someone who has a hearing disability and needs captions on all the videos? So open education is this huge idea around reducing barriers and increasing access. And so, as Teresa mentioned, OER Colorado is the launch of the PK-12, and Mallory mentioned there's higher ed that's involved as well. If after today you're really feeling inspired, you're like, I had no idea I would nerd out about OER, you can also join the Go Open Network, which is a national network across the United States of OER supporters. So we'll make sure that you have all of those resources. So what are OER? And thanks, Mallory, for dropping those links in the chat. And one more time, here is the link to the published slide deck so that you can follow along and see the embedded links in the slide deck as well. So some folks have already said they have a little bit of experience with OER. OER is an brand, right? So OER is the idea of open educational resources, and it's any teaching and learning material that either resides in what's called the public domain, which we'll clarify in a second, or has been released under a license that permits no cost access, use, adaptation, and redistribution. So some of you probably already know a little bit about copyright. The idea that anytime you create a new work, you get to copyright it, right? It's yours. You make up a lullaby that you sing to your kid at night. Voila, you created a new work. And if you, it is automatically copyrighted in the US. Copyright is automatic. And then if you choose, you can file for the copyright. You don't have to. Anytime you share it, you can just go ahead and put the copyright on it. And what that means is that all of the rights are reserved. People cannot use it, share it, adapt it, or even distribute it without your permission. So if I sing a lullaby to my kid at night and I share the video on my social media, it is automatically mine, and no one in theory should be sharing it without my permission, except that a lot of sharing sites, when you create an account, have made their own terms that say X, Y, Z. So what we find ourselves in now is a really confusing place of copyright, where many folks maybe don't understand what copyright means anymore. They might not understand what rights they have if they're sharing their resource. For example, if you share something on YouTube, there are certain terms and restrictions that are just part of you having a YouTube account that you might not have paid attention to. So what we like to invite folks to do is what we invite you to choose a Creative Commons license. Creative Commons has created a set of open licenses, right? You don't have to use Creative Commons, but it's the best defined and understood and shared vocabulary around how to reserve some rights about a resource and release some other rights. And so public domain is the entire other end. The most open, right, is public domain, where anyone can use something and they don't even have to give attribution. So on the next slide, I'm going to kind of show you the main idea of Creative Commons licenses, or that you're at least giving attribution. If you re-sing my lullaby song, you at least say, hey, this is from Joanna Scamitzi, right? You get up on stage, before you sing it, you would at least say, this is Joanna Scaminzi's lullaby, right? And so that would be the most basic Creative Commons license, which I'll show you in just a second. Before I show you all those licenses, which can sometimes be overwhelming, one of the big things that we just want to share is that for educators, this does get even more complicated because there's a clause about what's called fair use, which means that you can use resources as an educator if XYZ, ABC, it gets so complicated. So again, what we like to just invite educators to do is come to this place. I call it like, come into the light of Creative Commons, where when you use these licenses, you know exactly what you are able to do, because there have been districts and states and educators who have been violating copyright code, and it does become a big thing in some instances. So when you create a new work or you go to use works, we encourage you to look for these Creative Commons licenses. And once you know, you kind of can't unknow. You'll start to see it everywhere that maybe you hadn't seen it before. So these are this tool for adding open permissions to authored materials. They have defined use, clear restrictions, and authors put them on their use to inform how resources can be used by others. So just for example, if we go on to the OERColorado site, at the bottom, you'll see there's the license, CC BY and CSA, and it's also written here, right? And so what does this mean? What do those licenses mean? So we'll take a second and look at what they mean. I'm going to read through them. If you are following along your screen, and if you happen to be using a screen reader, it's actually not going to read you all of this as well, but it is going to give you a link to a page that has a transcript of this written out, because this is actually an image that a screen reader can't read. So I'm going to go over the terms of the licenses. There's 1, 2, 3, 4 main terms that can be combined to make all of these different licenses that vary in how open the license is, or how not quite so open, or how restrictive the license is. So this image from Creative Commons introduced that really you can do public domain. Anything that is created by the federal government is actually public domain. You don't have to do anything. You just get to use it all you want. However, I, like many others, will still show that CC0 public domain dedication, because if you don't put a license on something, then people actually are required to assume full copyright. So it's great when you see CC0 or public domain, because you know you can do whatever you want with that. I could change this from green to red, right? Might not want to do that because maybe they're using color on purpose here. But that is what public domain means. I can use it. I don't have to give attribution. This next term of a license is CC BY. And if you look at the rest of the Creative Commons licenses, they all have the BY term, which means that anytime you use it, you have to give attribution. And that's something that I think educators struggle a little bit with. Like, do I want someone to know that I didn't make this assignment? Right? And so especially how we model for students giving attribution. Where did this resource come from? Who originally made it? I think it makes you smarter to have worked smarter, not harder, to not be creating something from scratch. So we really invite folks to give attribution. If you're following along on the slide deck, you'll actually see all of my image attributions are on the very last slide. That's an accessibility practice for screen readers because it's difficult for screen readers to read text boxes. So all of the slide image attributions are on the very last slide. So sometimes when folks create an OER, they want it to be shared openly and used openly, but interestingly, they don't want any derivatives or changes made to it. That seems kind of against the big idea of open licensing, right? One of the goals for many of us is that, sure, you can change it, translate it into Spanish, add a new image, add an extra text, chunk it for your students who have reading disabilities, right? And so derivative works is kind of almost bordering on this part of real full copyright. You'll see it's down here under not open at all, very. I will say there are some OER that are made that the reason ND is put on it is because they want it used exactly that way for a pedagogical reason. We see, especially with teaching mathematical practices, that creators of OER are like, I want people to use it. I want people to have free access, but please teach it using this strategy because this is what research shows is the best way to teach this particular topic. So ND, non-derivative, it's not very common in the OER world, but we do see it sometimes. Share alike is a term of a license that folks may or may not have seen before. What it means is that you can still do almost anything you want, right? So this CC by SA, but you have to keep this license on it. So let's go back to my lullaby example, and I've made this lullaby and I want anyone to be able to use it. Anyone can still change it. They have to give me attribution. And let's say that Teresa makes a derivative work of my lullaby. She can. She could maybe translate it into Portuguese and sing it, which she can because it doesn't say no derivatives. But her version will have to have the same license as me, CC by SA. And it's a way to protect open, right? If I made it open to begin with, I want to make sure it's at least that open to continue on. So if you see SA share alike, for example, on OERColorado, this is SA share alike, then anything that you create that's a derivative work has to also have that license. The last term is one that makes a lot of sense in the OER world where we really want things to be free. It's non-commercial. So for example, this license says CC by NC. In order to use it or make changes to it, I have to give attribution. And I can't sell it to make money. So one thing that we see that comes up is, well, I have a digital OER, I have to print it, and I have to cover the cost of the printing. So it doesn't mean that it has to be 100% free all the time. It just shouldn't come at a cost to the user. So we see that sometimes folks will put non-commercial on theirs because they don't want their things put in a textbook that's going to then be sold by a textbook publisher. So some people will often put non-commercial on their OER license because they want to make sure that their work isn't being put in something that is being sold for profit. Whew. Okay, so that is a lot of licensing examples. We're going to do a little bit of practice now. So if you want to open the game, you can. You should have the link to it in your slide deck. But really what I'd like for you to do is have your chat box open. So if you can open up your chat box. And I'm going to read you the example out loud. And then in the chat box, if you will put what license you think best prefers to this. We do want to actually start by giving credit to Kenneth Leroy Busby. So once you know, you can't unknow, here's that CC BY license. So Kenneth Leroy Busby created the Test Your Knowledge Match the Creative Commons licenses game. And as we play it, I could go in, if I knew how to code this, I could go in and change this to how would this author license their work, right? I might change it from the spelling of license here to the traditional American spelling. I could do that. I have the rights based on this license. So just kind of keep that in mind, but we'll give Kenneth Leroy Busby some credit. This is a great game. So if you are someone who might be sharing resources with other educators, this game is a great way to kind of practice. Okay, so we have an author who says, quote, I want credit for the resource, and I don't want anyone to make modifications of it, but I don't care if they make money off of it when they reshare it. So in the chat box, if you think it's public domain, you would put public domain or CC0. If you think it's just attribution, you would put CC BY. So we'll take a minute for folks to put in the chat box which license they think it is. And some wait time here. I see a lot of consensus in the chat box, right? So most folks are saying CC by ND, give that attribution, but don't make any derivatives. Correct. Okay, so we'll do two more. The next says, I don't care if others change my resource as long as they give me credit. I don't want them making money off of the work, even if they modify and reshare a derivative of it. Plus, they must let others modify their derivative works. A lot of clauses here. You can change it, have to give credit, don't make money. You can change it, but they have to let others modify their derivative works as well. Okay, so I think one of the keys here is this, you have to let others make changes that, right? Most people are catching the attribution. We're seeing that they don't want them to make money. And it's going to be key that they said they want some control over what the derivative works are licensed. So that's going to be that essay or share alike part. I think for most people, the share alike is the license that is maybe the most challenging. This is actually going to be where we look at the needs of the user, right? So now we're looking at which license or licenses would best match the user's need. And while you're thinking about, what license would this user be looking for? Teresa did share in the chat box that if you're really interested in copyright and OER, Creative Commons does have a certificate program that dives deeper into their license. Yeah, I think it's interesting, Leah. It's like, well, am I looking for what they're describing? Because if I'm looking for what they're describing, I might be looking at like non-commercial, non-derivative. But really, yeah, Nate brings up a good point. Any of the licenses would work for them. So let's see if this is saying non-commercial. Oh, it was a multiple choice. That's why, right? So Nate, you hit it on the head. I will fully say that this has changed since I used it last night and practiced, because I've never seen this end user part before. So this has been updated since last night. So there we are. I've never seen the user part. New one on me today. Learn something new every day, right? So it's a great way to practice. And there are still, even once you become kind of an expert in OER, there are still a lot of misconceptions about which resources are genuinely open versus those that are just free. And especially with our librarians in here, this is something that you probably see a lot. So want to invite folks, if you want to unmute, we love hearing your voice. So we'll start with question 1. If there's anyone who wants to unmute and tell us an example of something that's free, but still restricted, because to be fully open, then you're allowing users to do what we call these 5 R's: remix, revise, reuse, retain, and redistribute. So if you want, you can unmute, or if you don't, just throw in the chat some examples of free things that still have restricted use.
So I'll jump in for some things that are free but have restricted use. We also have a link on our site to a what is it? A referatory, we call it. And these are resources that teachers can use for free in their classroom, but that still maintain some degree of copyright or restrictive use. And those are things like I can think of I taught game design for a little while at a university, and I know that it's the two of the bigger softwares that are used make their software available for free, Unity and the Unreal Engine. So you can go in and you can use their software to design and develop a game. If you're not going to commercialize that, there'll be a watermark on their software or something that indicates that you've used that. And then if you were going to commercialize it, you would want to have to pay for that to remove the watermark. So you see some of those things that happen. There's also, free samples of things. You can use a resource maybe, for a free 30-day trial, but that's not necessarily indicating that you can continue to use it. So those are some examples that we have that we can direct teachers to. There's also other sites where, they are providing things for free, but then they require you to sign up and register and give your email away. And then, maybe you're subject to marketing for those as well. So those are some other examples where, the resource itself may be free, but there's additional things that have to take place in order to be able to access or use that.
Anybody else?
As a, when I was in the classroom, I found, like I said, I was constantly looking for free resources. So I'd like to see maybe if anybody else has other experience with that. Like you've gone to look for free resources and challenges that you've found, if you'd be willing to share.
Yeah, some coming in through the chat. Ray shared, library books. And so our public libraries do a great job of making that initial purchase of a book or a magazine or a video that others can access for free, but there's still restricted use. If you check out a video from your public library, you can't then turn around and host a viewing party and charge admission to it. And Nate was sharing most things that are kind of shared on social media, you can access them for free, but when you look at those kind of terms of use, there are often restrictions there. And that applies to a lot of news sources. So when we think about, teachers, I used to use a lot of CNN.com news resources for my students because they've been written in a way for most students to be able to access them at that reading level, right? But I have started to really push myself to use like BBC, which uses a different set of licensing, and some things like National Geographic or PBS are trying to move towards OER, but most of the time, even those will sometimes have restricted use on them. Anyone have an example of something that is free and has unrestricted access, but maybe isn't fully available to like revise or remix, right? The ones that you can, it's free and you can still maybe share it, but you still can't really remix or revise it.
I think one thing that comes to mind, some of it is the type of media that you have. So videos oftentimes are things that are, a challenge, even when maybe they are fully unrestricted and you can remix them. Many people might be limited by having the tools to remix it or the ability, the skill to remix it in a way that's meaningful. And then you have to take into consideration of whether or not that is a resource that you would even make sense to remix. Like what would you be doing other than perhaps maybe trimming, like trimming it for, so those are some challenging things. Software, code, video games, interactive things. I know, like if we look at the UC Boulder simulations that they provide, I can't remember. I haven't looked at their licensing in a while here, but that one always struck me as I know they make those available for OER and for educational use. But in my mind, I'm like, goodness, I would have to have some pretty significant technical skill to be able to go in and do any kind of revision or adaptation on that, even if I was allowed to be able to do that. So in my case, it's best if I just use that resource, as intended, so that I'm not breaking it.
Yeah, these are great examples. And a lot of what we want to do with educators is just get them talking about, looking, being aware of, and even sharing with their students. So when I run across something that I find, that then I'm really able to understand, well, hey, if I'm searching here, will I even be able to find the terms of use? And that's one of the reasons that we love when folks are starting their search on a place where they know they're going to find OER, right? So if I go to DPLA, if I go to National Geographic, if I go to PBS, sometimes it's still really hard to find the actual licensing and know, well, what rights do I have? Versus if you start on a platform like OERColorado, you know that you're going to be able to find the licensing easily and know what you're going to be able to do. Stacy brought up teachers pay teachers. Oh, I have so many feelings that tie into like teacher salary and paying a living wage and all of these other things, right? So yes, it's been such a challenge for educators because this is another reason that OER are a huge passion of mine, is because we want all students to have access to high quality resources. We don't want to be asking teachers to pay for things out of their pocket. We want to ask our culture, our governments to fund high quality educational resources, but not at the cost of paying textbook suppliers. And that's where we've been for a really long time. And teachers pay teachers and other places where teachers have to buy resources themselves, it can kind of solve the problem, but it doesn't get to the root of the matter, which is what is this true value of OER, right? So let's take a second and look at how if we really turn our eye to OER and we really say, I'm going to put my time and my money and my heart and my work into what I truly believe, right? So what do you think are the big reasons for using OER? So we're going to take a minute here, and there's no wrong answer. This is a great time to just brainstorm and throw that chat box up with as many reasons as you can think of for why to, as I say, come to the light side and use the force, right? Use your force in a meaningful way. And we think about that OER. So we're going to take a minute. I'm going to exercise some wait time, some quiet. What are the reasons for OER? Yes, I love seeing that chat box just zoom. So type, enter, type, enter. Throw all those ideas at you. Yeah, so take a second and go back through the chat and add some of those little emojis to folks, right? Read through what your colleagues have said and you can reply to them, you can add an emoji. Because we're each going to come in with it with different reasons. And OER is definitely the type of thing that it takes some time, it takes some commitment. It's a shift, right? It's a shift of practice. If the old way that you used to look for resources was just to go to Google, it's a shift. But we definitely see some themes through what folks are saying. A lot of folks are talking about the cost savings. And so there is a video that we've embedded here. We're not going to watch the entire video because next we're going to get to the practicing of finding the OER. At higher ed, they call it zero textbook cost, ZTC. We do see this becoming very, very important for our dual enrolled students. So students who are taking courses at their local community colleges, because those students are still in that K-12 setting, but then they're being asked to pay for textbooks. And previously, some of the ESSA dollars would be able to support paying for those textbooks, but that money is going away. So in order for students to still have access to that dual enrollment, we have to look at how we really try to get that zero textbook costs. There are entire districts that have adopted OER that choose to save money by using OER. We do actually see that students do have better grades when they're using OER. And a lot of you brought this idea up of customization of the resources. I have a student who, my own child, who needs his materials chunked for him to be able to read. His ADHD makes it really hard for him to access the knowledge in a resource if there's a ton of other distracting things on the pages. And so he does better if the resource is actually chunked and divided for him. And so we see lower failure rates of courses. And then again, at that higher ed level, we see lower withdrawal rates because we talk about first day access. And this is really important for accessibility as well. If you have a teacher who gets added a student on day 10 who has a hearing impairment, and that student isn't able to keep up with the course because the course has a bunch of videos that aren't captioned, then we start to see that students aren't able to be successful in that course, and they have to withdraw from a course or leave the course. And of course, and then we heard about customization. And so what we see is that OER allows educators to keep information up to date as well as to customize it. So if you're talking about the water cycle and runoff into streams, and you're letting educators actually be able to customize a resource to use the names of the local streams, that makes a huge difference in how students access it. I'm going to turn it over to Teresa. She wanted to share a little bit about AI.
Yeah, I wanted to follow up on a few things that we were talking about earlier, just some observations with sort of the types of resources that we're seeing. In terms of like filling in the gaps and customization to a population. One example I can speak to here with Colorado is that I recently had the opportunity to attend a mariachi educator workshop with MSU Denver. And MSU is again one of our higher education institutions, but that is a core practitioner of open education and produces a lot of OER. And they're looking at doing a certificate program to help prepare educators to stand up mariachi programming in high schools and middle schools. And so that has a huge potential outreach because for one thing, it's a niche type of curriculum. So we're not seeing, that produced en masse. It targets retention and student outcomes for the Latino, Latinx population. However, it's very accessible and open to all students that might want to learn music. And then by being able to allow them a repository where to host those resources, that makes it much more accessible throughout the entire state. So that's just one example of sort of this niche or gap type curriculum being able to be filled with OER materials. And then a few other things to look at if we're talking about music, since mariachi came up. Music is one of those ones where it can be a little hard to identify copyright. You may have music that is older than, is it 100 years, Joanna, now? 100 that would fall into the public domain. But when you're listening to like a performance of that, then that actually, the performance itself might be copyrighted, even though the score for the music or the original music might have been in the public domain. And so it becomes a little bit difficult even when you're looking for public domain materials to truly identify whether or not what you have found is in the public domain, even though it may be older than, say, 100 years. A couple other observations with that is that we're seeing, new materials be created with AI that's sort of scavenging other resources that are under copyright. And so we're entering a period where you've kind of got a gray area in terms of how that is going to be applied. So that should be something that comes up here in the next few years. You're already seeing legal cases where, like the New York Times, going after some of the the AI-based softwares, to say, hey, you used our materials to then like replicate and generate new material, not the material itself, but the underlying structure, the reading level, the way that the stories and things were crafted and put together. And so it's going to be very interesting in the next few years to sort of see what happens with AI and OER and copyright in general. And one last thing I'll make a quick note of is in the state of Colorado, I know for the federal government, the materials that are created in the federal government are all in the public domain. Materials that are created within the state of Colorado are not necessarily, there's nothing specific that states that all of those resources are public domain. And so that is one thing to have to watch out for with specific states, is that, some states do also follow that same guideline and some do not necessarily. And so again, as you brought up, Joanna, one of the benefits of using OER Commons or OER Colorado is that you can have some assurance that when those resources were created, that a lot of that copyright information was sort of taken care of for you. And oh yeah, and you brought up a good point there. You might actually want to let people know with with what you found on Wikipedia.
Absolutely. Yeah, I put that because Teresa was asking what the statute of the statute of limitations are. And one of the real challenging things again about copyright is it is really confusing, and it actually varies from country to country. So you can't say, oh well, I can definitely do this, because it depends on I think it depends on where the work was created, not the background of the creator, right? So not was this created by an American citizen, but where was it actually created? So copyright gets so confusing, and it's why I love OER and Creative Commons licensing. So if you're really interested in digging deeper into copyright, I know I took an entire course in my graduate program about copyright and didn't realize, like, hey, I kind of enjoy nerding out and learning more about this. Stacy wants to know a little bit more about OER and AI. And so at ISKME, we have a whole kind of task force working on this intersection between OER and AI resources, and supporting educators and institutions in looking at how can you safely leverage AI to do things. So Stacy, AI can do all sorts of things. It can curate for you. It can create for you. But again, it gets a little complicated there. So Stacy, what I would love to do is, in a second, I'm actually going to post a new discussion board prompt for us. And one of the things I'm going to do is ask, like, hey, what is one topic that you want to learn more about in terms of OER? What we're going to do first is make sure that everyone has joined our group, right? So I think we've had about 7 folks join the group. And so we really want to make sure that everyone is able to join our group, because it's where we'll be exploring and saving resources today. So our last third of our session today is where we do the actual practice, right? So I'm going to put the link to the group into the chat box if you haven't yet joined it. Then now's a great time. If you haven't created an account yet, you will actually have to create an account first. And so that would be up here at the right-hand corner. You won't be able to join the group or contribute to the group unless you have joined. You won't be able to participate in discussions or contribute files unless you have joined the group. So if you will go ahead and take a second and join the group. If you've already joined it, if you'll go ahead and answer this very first discussion board post where you introduce yourself. Teresa posted that, and so we'd love for you to introduce yourself and tell us what you want to get out of the series. I'm going to turn my screen, stop sharing my screen for just a moment.
And Karen, I'll answer that. I think you're totally able to come to all of the webinars, and we'll be inviting everybody attending, everybody who signed up to each of the webinars. We may have done it in a way so that they go on a case by case basis, though.
If you joined, you got an Google Calendar invitation to all of the sessions, just in case you could make it. So that should be showing up for each of the next 3, one next week, and then the 2 in the fall. But I'll also just be sending out a follow-up email at the end of today. At the end of tomorrow, it'll have the recording that has been captions edited and the reminder. This Zoom link is the same. It's the same across all of the sessions so that you don't have to worry about, do you have the right link? So one of the great things about the platform and the group is that anybody can ask a question at any point. And I see a question about which webinar is available. Let me follow up with folks at the very end of our session today to make sure that you have access to the other webinars, for sure. So when you join the platform, you're then able to do things like join any group that you want. You can even make your own group, right? So you can go to see all groups, and let's say that you're like, I wish there was a high school biology group, right? So I can search for biology and there's not one. Well, guess what? I can create a group. Anyone can create a group. And that is a big part of this idea of open education practice, is making sure that folks can find each other, connect with each other. We have a group just for this series. And in this series, we are going to do a little bit of discussioning, right? It's how you make your thinking visible. And we benefit from making your thinking visible because we know what you want, right? I always call myself the OER fairy godmother. Like, oh, I wish I had this. Oh, bibbidi bobbidi boo. Now you do, right? And so you will get occasional notifications of new discussion board posts. So maybe, let's see, maybe Stacy wants to post specifically about AI. She can start a new discussion board specifically about AI. We've had people say, hey, I'm really looking for some math OER resources, or I'm really looking for accessibility resources, or I have this problem of practice. Can people help me with it? So even within our group, any of you can start a new discussion. So we invite you to do that. The discussion board post for today's webinar is going to look at what do you want to learn more about, right? Because what we have scheduled are some big sessions, but we can always make little videos. We can always look at how you connect with each other between May and our next sessions in the fall. So we really invite you to join the community. This group, other groups, create a group, whatever that looks like for you. Because not only does it help you find things and not reinvent the wheel, but it kind of fills your cup up to be around other people who are doing some of the same things that you're interested in doing. It keeps it new and fresh and relevant to you. So,
Joanna, can I make one comment that if you do create a group, reach out to me and let me know, and I can have it moved to whatever hub you might be interested in joining. So for instance, I know we did have some interest in AI. I posted the link there for our AI hub. And say, for instance, you created a group there and you wanted it to live in that location on that hub, I can move it there for you.
great, thanks. And I'll offer the word pin, right? Because it keeps all of the groups still live in in our main kind of landing spot, and so that anyone can find them. But then, like Teresa said, she can pin it onto one of the hubs so that it kind of lives in two spots, right? It's again that beautiful difference between a digital library and an actual library, where when someone checked the book out, it was gone for forever, where it only lived on that shelf. And if it wasn't there, you couldn't find it, versus our digital library, which is where things can live in all of those different places. Great.
If
So I
you're
want to
looking quickly, go ahead.
it's okay. I just want to make sure we get to search. So if you've got another thing to add, and then I'm going to dig into search. Teresa, did you have something else you wanted to add?
Oh, I was going to let you go into search, but if they wanted to know where the AI hub is, it's under communities of practice if you're there and you want to drive there for a moment.
Oh, so it's a group, not a hub.
It's a hub, yeah. So if she's there is a group on there, but there's also a hub of resources.
Okay. Okay, great. Thank you.
Mhm.
Okay, so let's dig into today. We want to look at how we find OER. And as Teresa and I mentioned, one of the benefits of coming to OER Colorado first is you're going to be finding OER when you come to OER Colorado. Since we're here, I will point out that on hubs, you can search for within just those resources. So a hub is a place where groups have been curated and resources have been curated. So if I know, like, hey, I'm specifically looking for such and such, I can search the AI hub and find things that have specifically been curated onto that hub. But most people choose to start searching with our general search toolbar, which is up here at the top, where you can use a keyword. You can, if you want, start to use some of our filters. If you're like me and you want to try to find what you're looking for from the very beginning, you can enter keywords, and then you can even choose particular standards. So I might choose a next gen science standard, and I can, drill all the way down to the specific thing. I can say I only want things that are for fourth grade. I can say that I want it to be unrestricted use, so only public domain or CC BY. And then I can also say, well, I want it to only be things that have already been rated by other people on the platform. Or, hey, I'm actually looking for a lesson. I don't want to see any modules or syllabi. And so you can really start to drive that search and make it really, really narrow if that's what you want. And so what I'm going to do now is just give you a little bit of time to do some searching. I do want to point out that when you do your searching, so let's just go back and pretend like I'm just doing a general search, right? I didn't add any extra supports. I search economics and I get 1,001 results. That's when I can start to use the filters, which the broad search gives me everything, and then I can start to narrow or refine my search based on the filters. So we'll take a little bit of time here for you to do a search, right? We actually want to take some time for you to search. And then once we've done some searching, then I'm going to have you save it to our folders, which is a really important part of being organized on the platform. Some great structures. So I'm going to set a timer for about 7 minutes. I think within 7 minutes, you should be able to find something that you might use in your line of work. I'm going to play some music, but if you don't like the music, it's okay to mute it. And we'll come back in 7 minutes. So at 10:19, we'll come back to each other. So take these 7 minutes to really go find some cool things, because we're going to share our findings in a second. So again, to save a resource that you found, you can either be on the resource landing page and you can click save and save it to your items. You can create a new group, or for today, we're asking everyone to save it either to the group, or I like to make a folder that I call items to review, because in our next webinar, we're actually going to practice using this evaluation button, the comments, the stars. We're going to look at the evaluation tools that are built into the platform, as well as aligning it to standards. And saving resources helps you to be able to, of course, save time, save with others, and then we can actually use it to, we work with a lot of professional learning sessions where folks will want to save maybe 30, and then as they go through and evaluate, they'll remove it from their group. Just a side note, you won't really ever be able to mess anything up, because you might say, hey, delete this from a group, but it doesn't delete it from the platform. A very small number of people have that sort of admin power, right? So what we're doing right now for just a few minutes is, what resource did you find that you really like? And then practicing saving that to our group. And again, from the search results button, you can click many or all of your search results, click save, and then you can save it to your folder. And it will alert you, you saved 2 items. Hooray! So we'll take just another minute. Hopefully we'll start to see some of your resources show up in our group. Right now we have a bicycle obstacle course, a mining town, best practices for using technology with multilingual families, and the California Gold Rush.
Janet, do you have a moment to share, to show people how they can see their resources under their profile as well? You don't have to go there necessarily, but if you look at your profile picture in the upper right-hand corner, the additional way to find your folder and see what your items are.
Yep, absolutely. So your My Items is where any folders that you have, like here's my economic terms folder is there. And I can look at all of my items or just my unfiled items. I can create new folder titles. And that way I can have some hierarchy and organization of my items. From there, I can see my groups, my hubs, my profile, right? So all of my features. And then when I go back to my group, this is where there are folders for us to share. So we'll take about 1 more minute. Hopefully everyone was able to find at least one thing that you could save in our folder, because we'll use it in our next session. As a side note, a little bit of sprinkle, right? If you are a big fan of previewing and that technique, pedagogically, I love it because it lets some people's brains start to think about things. So in our next section, we're going to be looking at how we really dig deep into a resource, right? So on this resource on the landing page, I can see that this particular resource, it doesn't actually have a Creative Commons license. It says educational use permitted, right? And so that's one of the things that we worked on today. So let's look at this one, the California Gold Rush. Again, another educational use permitted. Let's see what we've got here. We seem to have found a lot of custom licenses. I know how to show you what I'm looking for. So this particular one, antioxidant enzymes, right? You can see here on the OERColorado, it's always going to tell you the license really clearly. This license is CC BY NCSA. It tells you, it links you, it shows you the image. And so today we were really looking at what are OER? What does it mean? What does this particular license mean? How can I find it? And how can I save it, right? So I'm going to save this one to our group. And in our next session, we're going to look at, what do these stars mean? How could I align it to a standard once I look at it? How can I evaluate it and give people feedback and make my thinking and professional experience visible to others? And what is this comment here? And what does a tag mean? And what do all these other things mean? So between now and next week, as you play around on OERColorado and you come up with more questions, if you need anything, my email address is on the slide deck. I'll show that in just a second. But you can also use this brown support button. This is probably more for like technical support. But if you find a resource that you're like, hey, I'm not sure about this, it might have a copyright issue in it or something like that. This brown support button follows you around like a little Jiminy Cricket on your shoulder to help you out. And so in our next session, we'll be looking at evaluating OER. We are going to end with 1 extra minute because it is going to take you about 1 minute for you, 2, maybe 3 minutes for you to take this reflection survey. So this reflection survey is how you will get your certificate if you're looking at wanting to receive contact hours for today. We do ask that you fill out this reflection survey as soon as possible, preferably today. And before you do that, we are asking to make sure that you participated in the discussion board posts. So we'll send out the link to the reflection survey again as well, but we encourage you to go ahead and open that reflection survey up in one of your tabs and keep it there so that you can get it filled out, preferably today. It's a pretty short survey with a lot of check boxes, but a few spots for you to give us some open-ended information. We hope that you are going to join us next week and that by then you will have participated in the discussion boards and saved some resources for us in our folder. Definitely complete the reflection survey, especially if you're wanting to receive a certificate, because that's how I know who attended and who to send it to. If you need further help on the platform, you can use that support button that follows you around, or you can shoot me an email. I'm your new OER fairy godmother. And I'll let Teresa give you a final farewell and sign off. But it's been a real pleasure to be with you all today and look forward to seeing you next week. Teresa, final words?
Yeah, just thank you all for taking the time to come this morning. We really appreciate you, wanting to learn more about open educational resources in Colorado, and hope that you will like what you found and be advocates going out there into the community to let other people know about what OER is and what it can do.
Thanks, everyone. I'm going to stop the recording, but I'll hang out for another minute if there's anyone who needs it.